This is my new podcast for self-love, self-care, and motivation. Welcome back to my channel. There is something about the end of the year that makes us quietly honest with ourselves. We replay moments we thought would mean more, revisit goals we once felt certain about, and notice how some things changed while others stayed the same, no matter how much effort we put in. This reflection often appears in ordinary, in between moments, late at night, in the shower, while scrolling, with a subtle question. Why does it feel like I've grown, but my life hasn't caught up? The year doesn't ask what you achieved, it asks who you have been, who you became while chasing things, and who you stayed loyal to when nobody was watching. It reminds us that wanting something and becoming the person who naturally lives it are two different things. And that's where this conversation really begins. There's a point in personal growth where the problem is no longer lack of information. You're not confused, you're not unaware, you're not new to any of this. You understand manifestation, mindset, identity, energy, all of it. And yet, if you're honest with yourself, there's still a gap between what you know and what your life actually looks like. Not a dramatic gap, a subtle one. The kind that shows up in quiet moments when you're alone with your thoughts and you realize that you're still waiting for something to change. That moment is usually when people either start forcing things or start doubting themselves. They add more techniques, more rules, more pressure, or they quietly decide that maybe this just works for other people. And neither of those reactions is the answer. Because the truth is, at this stage, the issue is not effort, it's identity. This episode isn't about how to get what you want. It's about how to become the person for whom what they want already makes sense. Because manifestation doesn't respond to wanting, it responds to who you are being while you want. Most people don't realize this, but you're already living as the result of your past assumptions, not your conscious affirmations, not the things you say you believe, but the quiet conclusions you made about life, about yourself, about what usually happens to you. Those conclusions are running your reality far more consistently than any technique you've ever tried. Think about it. There are things you expect without effort, outcomes you assume as normal, limits you don't question, and you don't feel emotional about them. You don't get excited or anxious. You're neutral, certain, settled. And because of that, life meets you there without resistance. That's the level manifestation works at. Not excitement, not hope, assumption. And this is where most people misunderstand the whole process. They think becoming the person who already has what they want means pretending, acting confident, forcing belief, lying to themselves, but that's not what it is at all. In fact, forcing belief does the opposite. It highlights doubt, it creates inner friction, it keeps you aware of the gap. Real identity change is quiet, it's subtle, it feels ordinary. The person who already has what they want is not constantly thinking about it. They're not analyzing it, they're not checking for signs, they're not asking when. One of the biggest traps people fall into is living in the emotional state of wanting. Wanting feels productive, it feels active, it feels like you care. But emotionally, wanting is a state of not having that. And when that becomes familiar, when it becomes your baseline, you unintentionally anchor yourself there. This is why some people can visualize every day and still feel stuck. They are rehearsing desire instead of normality. They are practicing longing instead of ownership. Ownership doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't feel exciting. It feels calm, almost boring, almost obvious. And that's exactly what it works. Think about the things you already have in your life. You don't wake up excited that they exist. For example, food or the house. You don't affirm them. You don't visualize them. You just assume them. And because you assume them, they stay stable. So When we talk about becoming the person who already has what they want, we're talking about shifting from emotional investment to emotional neutrality, from anticipation to expectation, and from effort to familiarity. And this shift doesn't happen through motivation, it happens through awareness. Pay attention to how you react when nothing is happening, when there is silence, when there is delay, when there is uncertainty. That reaction reveals your true self concept. If silence makes you anxious, part of you assumes things fall apart. If delay makes you doubt, part of you assumes good things take longer for you. If ease feels suspicious, part of you expects struggle. Those assumptions are not moral failures, they are learned patterns. And they can change, but not through force. You don't fight an old identity, you outgrow it. You became who you are now through repetition, through experiences that shaped your expectations, through stories you told yourself when things didn't work, and stories you reinforced when they did. Most of those stories were formed unconsciously, which means they don't dissolve through logic, they dissolve through new lived internal experiences. That's why trying to fix yourself never works. The moment you approach change from the belief that something is wrong with you reinforce the identity you're trying to leave. You turn growth into self rejection, and self rejection cannot create expansion. Becoming the person who already has what they want starts with allowing a new internal posture to exist without pressure. A posture that says, quietly, without announcement, this works out for me. Not because you're special, not because you deserve it more, but because this is the version of you are choosing to inhabit. And here's the part people don't like hearing. You don't need to feel confident to do this. You don't need to feel positive. You don't need to feel aligned all the time. Identity isn't built on emotion, it's built on repetition of state. You can feel uncertain and still choose not to organize your life around uncertainty. You can feel doubt and still not treat it as truth. You can feel fear and still live from a deeper expectation that things move in your favor. That's maturity, that's embodiment. The person who already has what they want doesn't need constant reassurance. They don't need proof. They don't need validation. They don't need to check progress. They trust movement even when it's invisible. And this is where detachment comes in, not as indifference, but as trust without supervision. Most people think detachment means letting go of desire. It doesn't. It means letting go of monitoring, letting go of constantly asking, is it working? Because that question itself assumes it might not. When you stop checking, you stop reinforcing absence. When you stop watching the clock, time moves differently. When you stop asking life to prove itself, it has space to respond. This doesn't mean you stop caring, it means you stop hovering. And something interesting happens when you do that. Your nervous system relaxes, your decisions change, your tone shifts, your energy becomes less sharp, less urgent, and people around you respond differently to you. Opportunities feel less forced, conversations flow more naturally, things meet you halfway. Not because you tried harder, but because you stopped resisting ease. This is also why action changes when identity changes. You don't need to plan a new behaviors. You don't need to micromanage yourself. When your inner assumption shifts, action follows automatically. You move differently, you speak differently, you choose differently, and it doesn't feel like discipline. It feels like alignment. And yes, doubt will still show up. That's normal. All identity doesn't disappear quietly. It questions. It tries to pull you back into what's familiar. But doubt doesn't have power unless you give it authority. You don't need to argue with doubt. You don't need to analyze it. You don't need to fix it. You just don't let it decide who you are. The moment you stop reorganizing your life around doubt, you begin living from a new center. And that's usually when things start to shift in ways you can't logically trace. A conversation leads somewhere unexpected, a delay redirects you, an opportunity appears that fits you better than what you were chasing, and you realize that the struggle wasn't necessary, it was just familiar. There's often a quiet moment when this clicks. Not a breakthrough, not a high, just a subtle recognition. You notice you're no longer trying to become someone, you're just being. And life feels less like a test and more like a response. That's when you know the identity has changed. Not because everything is perfect, not because you have everything yet, but because you are no longer negotiating your worth with reality. And that's the real shift. You don't need to rush this. You don't need to perform it. You don't need to announce it. Just notice who you are when no one is watching. Notice what you expect. Notice what you assume, because that version of you is already speaking to life. And life is listening. As this year ends, remember that nothing shifts when you want more. Everything shifts when you become different. So let the next chapter meet you as the person who no longer needs to prove, chase, or wait. That was all for today's episode. Thank you so much, guys, for listening. Have a nice day.